For the longest time, video games were seemingly impossible to adapt into TV or film. Don't get me wrong, lots of companies tried, and most of them completely failed or are hilariously bad. From the original Mario movie to the Street Fighter movie, these movies were campy messes, with strange choices from their costumes to their dialogue. They were hardly even trying to adapt the source material. The stories were confusing and the acting terrible. Except for M. Bison in the Street Fighter movie, Raul Julia went off with this one.
For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
So what happened? Simply put, the people behind the film didn't give it the love and care that it deserved. They didn't take it seriously because they don't take video games seriously. Games are for kids, and that's that. In the early 2000s, we would get a couple more mature video game movie adaptations like Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, and Hitman, and while I might enjoy these films, they take a lot of liberties that stray drastically from the source material. These films felt like they were already a movie idea somebody had, and then they slapped the video game title over it and called it a day. Even in the 2010s, there's just so many weirdly bad movies, from Prince of Persia to Assassin's Creed. For decades, video game movies would come out, get destroyed by fans and critics alike, and then flop. So there was a fear that video games were just unadaptable. And while some animated kids television shows would come out based on games, and these were also pretty weird, no big company would even dare to try and make a big budget TV show based on a game. But then something changed. Video game movies became profitable. Sonic the Hedgehog and the Mario movie both made a ton of money. Unfortunately, there really hasn't been a critically acclaimed video game movie. I'm hoping that the Legend of Zelda movie that comes out is good, but regardless, companies saw the value of video game adaptations. And we finally got not just good, but great adaptations of video games on television. But why? What's changed? Well, the people who actually grew up playing games became the creators of TV shows. So today, I want to discuss some of the best video game television shows and what makes them good adaptations. And then I want to discuss a bad example as well, so that people can avoid some of these mistakes as well. Here's how to adapt a video game. Minor spoilers for the following shows, so if you haven't watched them, you've been warned. The Last of Us was practically built to become a TV show. The game is already cinematic, and the story is phenomenal. So in all honesty, it wasn't that hard to adapt. The game follows Joel and Ellie as they travel across a zombie apocalyptic wasteland to get Ellie to a facility and potentially find a cure to the outbreak. And the show is the same exact premise. The reason the show worked was because they were able to recreate many of the most important cinematic elements from the game, while also adding a little bit extra in between to better the pacing and streamline the narrative. If you played the game, you'd know that there's just a lot of wandering and combat that isn't necessarily progressing the story much, so a lot of that is cut out, in exchange for more development for not only our main characters, but even the side characters. Sometimes it can feel a bit rushed for this reason, and I personally wish it had a few more episodes to flesh out the characters more, but in general, the choices they made were for the better. A lot of the main elements are carbon copies of scenes from the game, word for word, scene for scene. You can put them side by side and they'd match. It's kind of wild. But I don't want to completely say that it just copied the game entirely. Like I said, they would change some things here and there and add elements to make the show slightly better, at least in my opinion. One episode, and easily the best episode of the show, introduces us to Bill and Frank. It shows us one of the greatest love stories, while simultaneously world building, and it even fleshes out Joel, while also progressing the story by giving Joel a car, and further cementing the themes of the show. This is all done in one episode. None of this was in the game. Bill's just your friend that you meet in the game and he gives you a car. Frank doesn't even exist and he's mentioned in passing in one line. That's it. It's these changes that really elevated the show and earned it so much critical acclaim. I believe that episode ended up winning an Emmy, and Nick Offerman also won for playing Bill because he was really good. The acting in general is also solid. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey really sold this relationship, and they both did a great job. And some of the best elements of the show were their cold opens that have nothing to do with the game. All of these cold opens, from the doctor interview in the first episode to seeing how the outbreak started in a different episode, they are all just really great world building. And that's an important key element that a lot of video game adaptations don't understand, the importance of world building. Sure, if you're a fan of the games, you don't need these elements, but if you're making a TV show, you have to assume that people that are watching the show have never played the game or even heard of the game in their life. So ultimately, The Last of Us works because it doesn't try to fix what isn't broken and stays super close to the source material, while only changing parts when it will make the show flow better. It's not a perfect show by any means, and not all of their choices I agree with, like changing how the infection spreads. I don't know why they decided to do that, but in general, it's a great way to closely adapt a narrative-driven game into a TV show. Now, taking an almost complete opposite approach to adapting is the Fallout TV show. There were so many games that they could have directly adapted, but instead, the Fallout TV show introduces an original story and original characters into the Fallout universe. The show stars three main protagonists: Lucy, the Vault Dweller, Maximus of the Brotherhood of Steel, and the Ghoul. The show works because it introduces elements of the Fallout universe to the audience in a way where the people who have played the game feel rewarded for knowing how the world works already, and the people who have never played the game aren't really confused at all. And I'm saying this because my brother and my dad watched it and loved the show, and neither of them have ever played these games. I'm not just speculating, okay? Fallout fans will recognize elements from the game, references to past games, and Easter eggs, and will be even more excited when original concepts and ideas are introduced, especially those ideas and concepts that change the lore and the canon. Unlike the game, the show features many flashbacks to before the bombs fell, which helps the audience better understand the Fallout universe. Like I said before, world building. I think it was clever to make one of the main protagonists someone like Lucy. Because she's a Vault Dweller, she doesn't understand the world, so she acts as a stand-in for the audience. But in general, the show respects our intelligence and doesn't hold our hands. It shows and doesn't tell. But sometimes it does exposition dump when it really needs to. The show works really well as an adaptation. Sure, it's not a direct carbon copy of the previous Fallout games, but fans of the game will feel that it's a continuation of the Fallout franchise. And brand new people can get into it regardless because of the great world building, the solid writing, and the great acting from a stellar cast, especially Walton Goggins, who in my opinion steals the show. His depiction of a ghoul bounty hunter is not only awesome, but also menacing and even sad at times. Give this man an Emmy nomination, please. He is a standout. So ultimately, Fallout works because it creates a brand new story using an already established world, and it respects the game that it's based on, while it's also not afraid to add new elements. I love the Fallout game series, and this show blew me away. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. Now, I've given you two examples of great video game adaptations. One that stayed super close to the source material, and the other that created a completely new story in the world. So now let's see a show that does neither of these, and fails on multiple levels: Halo. As many people know, Halo is one of my favorite video game franchises, with Halo 3 being my favorite game of all time, so I really wanted to like this show, but it's just not it. They could have, and probably should have, straight up adapted Halo 1, 2, and 3 into 3 beautiful seasons of incredible content, similar to the Last of Us show. Or they could have told a completely unique story about some Spartans set in the Halo universe, similar to the Fallout TV show. Instead, we got a weird combination of both. It stars Master Chief, and while he is badass in his action scenes, his characterization is completely incorrect. He, for some reason, always takes off his helmet, something he has never done once in his 6 mainline games. He is very emotional and erratic. He also gets a little freaky when he's supposed to be asexual and sort of in love with Cortana. More like Master Cheeks, am I right? Either way, they completely butchered Master Chief as a character. And the show itself sort of takes place in the Halo universe, but not really. It doesn't seem clear exactly when this is supposed to take place, and it doesn't seem to follow any of the books or the game's canon much at all. So it's a completely original story. Is it at least a good one? I don't think so. You just have Master Chief touching artifacts left and right and having these flashbacks that are like, ugh, who cares? and I think it fails on so many fronts. The world building, like I said, super important, it's not done very well. It's a bit all over the place even for a Halo fan. And the acting isn't winning any awards anytime soon. And it seems like the showrunners knew this and pivoted a ton in the second season to try and be closer to the source material. But for me, I just feel like it was the wrong approach from the get-go. Halo is a rich series with so many great stories to adapt, from the mainline games, to Reach, to ODST, to the books. But for some reason, all of that was completely ignored in favor of a basic-ass sci-fi show with Halo paint on top of it. It's not even that bad. Okay, it's kind of bad. But if it wasn't for the Halo music and Halo elements, nobody would even care about this show. Man, being a Halo fan has been a tough ride. Video games have so much potential for adaptations, and it's up to the showrunners to respect the source material enough to make an actually great show that stands on its own. There's tons of ways to approach an adaptation, and depending on the game, the approach will definitely be different. Does your game not really have that much of a story mode or lore? You can use the show to tell a unique and original story with popular IP, like Arcane. There are a lot of people that don't even realize that that show is a League of Legends show, and I really do think that some games would make for great TV shows and movies. I would love to see a BioShock movie, a God of War show, an Overwatch movie, the Legend of Zelda movie, or even an Apex Legends TV show. And I hope that they are more like The Last of Us and Fallout and less like Halo. But what do you think makes for a good video game adaptation? Also, what are some of your favorites? I know there's other great shows like Arcane and Cuphead that I didn't really get to talk about, and maybe you genuinely really liked the Sonic the Hedgehog movie or the Super Mario movie. I didn't love them, but you know, there's fans out there. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.